looking forward to a really engaging session today.
It's going to be a great session.
How's our energy? We've had a long day, so I'm feeling good. I'm looking forward to
excited.
How's the weather in Melbourne today, Lara?
Sorry?
How's the weather in Melbourne today?
Honestly, the past week has been perfect. It's just crisp. It's the sun shining. You can still wear a t-shirt. We don't. It's not as muggy as what you might get up there sometimes.
Isabella's saying it's a vibe.
Yeah. Are you from Isabella? Are you from Melbourne? Are you?
I love it. That's so good. Hey guys, well, we're going to have a couple of minutes just to wait for people to start coming in. We don't want to start too early, give people a chance to be in the live room. But whilst we're waiting, very curious to see where everyone is from. So let us know what state or even suburb you guys are from. Very curious. It'll change the perspective of the webinar and the information you're consuming today.
Oh, I hope, Isabella, you're not too depressed about being in Melbourne. There's a lot of people that choose to come here from so many places in the world.
All right. Whilst people are coming in, Daniel, would you like to quickly touch upon one of my favorite things that we're offering the company?
Sure can. So everyone online, so before we get into it, the whole presentation, while you're waiting, you can scan the QR code on the screen. So what it is, we can unlock your maximum borrowing capacity. So many times I hear clients tell me that they don't know if they can buy something, they don't know if they can get a better borrowing capacity, they don't know if it's the right structure. So guys, beat the queue, get pre-qualified, scan the QR code, book yourself in, someone will give you a call tomorrow. So just beat the queue before at the end of this webinar, we have hundreds of people scanning this code, and there may be a delay on seeing you in with someone this week or either early next week. So unlock your maximum borrowing capacity, guys. Get a better borrowing capacity, get a better property, get a better overall situation, save some money.
Is there a reason why we decided to start offering this, Daniel?
Look, we've always offered it, but now we're just giving clients obviously the go ahead at the beginning. It's more the fact that clients keep asking us questions throughout the whole webinar about the borrowing capacity, that the banks are giving them a harder way through, they don't know what to do. So we started offering this service because we wanted people to feel that there is a way they can get a better overall situation. And we're going to offer it early in the beginning of the webinar. So guys who are online, secure your chance now it is, and get yourself pretty much an overall better financial position.
Yeah, and we would have sent you a couple of emails prior to you guys joining today talking about this product as well. Like Daniel said, finance is such an important key when it comes to figuring out what property is the best fit for you and what strategy works as well. So it really is a product that we're quite proud of. Now let's get into some more of the interesting things. I think we've got more people in the room now. Daniel, I'm happy to go. Lara, I'm happy to go if you guys are.
Yep. Let's go.
Let's go.
Perfect. So, everyone who's online, this is the Invest in Melbourne 2025 Market Update webinar. So, you have me and Luke as your main co-host. So, me and Luke have a combined property portfolio of just around $11 million in our property portfolio. So, that's over decades of our experience, what we've been through, how we got there, and I'm sure we'll share that throughout the webinar. We have 55 plus staff in counting. So, Liberty, we're not just a small 1 or 2 man band that you probably guys will speak to and people will make out they're not. We have people along the whole journey, whether they're in accounts, finance, on the floor in different states, even countries. So our staff give you guys a unique overall experience. And that's when we can offer you guys strategy, finance, research, and property. So at the end of the day, we don't want to be your TikTok buyers agents or your people on Instagram that talk about property all day. If you have a look at the bottom, just near our heads, you can see that we have our qualifications. We are QPIA, MFAA, Masters Builder Association, and many more. This is for you guys to know that we know what we're talking about. And it takes a while, Luke, to get these accreditations.
Sounds serious. We do put a lot of effort into these accreditations.
That's exactly right. So that's the webinar, guys. Let me also introduce my fabulous co-host, Luke. Luke is our head of research. So the one thing that I would say, guys, what I love about Luke, there's many things, but the one thing I love, yes, he's our head of research, but all the data, all the numbers that he will speak about today, he will break it down to make it so common sense that we can relate to it. Because how many times do we go down to read we know, seeing or we're absorbing? So Luke will break it down for us, which will give us a much better overall experience, and then you guys can have that satisfaction that makes sense, Luke. So kudos to you, Lukey.
I appreciate that. I think it came from realization when we even first started. There was just so much thrown at us that we ended up not making decisions earlier. So I think very early into my research career, it was really not just spamming data and phrases that nobody understands. It is to take that step to make it digestible, easy to understand, and actionable, which is super key. Now with Daniel, Daniel's our head of property and also head of strategy. He takes care of everything strategy. And the thing I really appreciate about him, and a lot of people don't know, is his importance and his foundation in finance. He started off in finance, understanding people's limitations, their borrowing capacity, how to increase that, and also kind of how that affects someone's purchasing decision. So there's a lot of people that aren't accredited out there, hence why I've got the accreditations on the screen here. And those are the guys that often give advice, not fully understanding the finance. And that's something Daniel takes a lot of pride in, and something that I really respect, and hence why we're here talking about it. Now, we've also got someone else that Daniel and I really respect, and this is Lara Morrow. So Daniel, Lara, I think from my end, before Daniel hops on, we can talk about data and locations and all this stuff, but Lara is someone that's actually lived and breathed what I am going to show you in the data section. She's someone from Melbourne, invests in Melbourne, a property expert in Melbourne, built her career in Melbourne. So I think the reason why I really appreciate her having a chance to speak tonight is to validate and also support a lot of the data-driven facts that I'll be presenting. So that, from my perspective, is really what I'm really excited to have Lara on tonight.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Luke. I think, and that's it. I mean, I love working alongside both of you because of your respect for data. You're not just thinking, oh yeah, this sounds like a good, potential property opportunity, or, looking at, what's popular or what's a fad. The amount of time and resources. I mean, you have a lot of staff that you put into getting the data right. And then you look at, which obviously we'll see today, history, and then using that history to see how that will repeat itself in the future. And obviously with myself, I've been in property for 30 years, so I'm able to actually, give some real life examples of what I've lived through and what I've seen, to then just, keep it real, really. Yeah.
Daniel, anything to add for Lara from your end?
Melbourne, and trust me, I know Melbourne better than my own backyard right now, so kudos to you, Lara.
Great.
To quickly touch upon, we do have 55 staff, some of which are actually here today. I think Shani is one of our star members. Look at her down there. She's online today to kind of moderate what you guys are saying, so feel free to say hello. So Shani is one of our fabulous customer support people that we absolutely adore. So if it's all right with you guys, I would love to get the show on the road, give you guys some more information that you guys can actually take action on and learn something today. So before we begin, first thing to note is if you guys are on your phone, please switch over to a desktop, at least a tablet. This is the best way for you guys to consume today's content. There'll be a couple of graphs where there'll be quite numerical and will require a bit of concentration. On that note, eliminate distractions if you can for the next 90 or so minutes. That's how long this webinar will be. And most important is for you guys to engage with what we are saying. There'll be moments in this webinar where you get to comment, and that is the optimal way for you guys to enjoy tonight's show, and also for us to understand where you guys are as an audience. So today, what will we learn? First thing, you'll learn about a unique perspective of investing. Like I said, my research can get pretty depth, but I like to make it simple. So understanding how to make research simple is the first thing you guys will learn. Second thing, why Melbourne is our #1 pick for 2025. why Daniel loves it, why Lara is an expert at it, and why I really believe Melbourne, from a research standpoint, is the #1 spot. Some suburbs within Melbourne, the importance of strategic investment planning, and then finally, some time with Lara, Daniel, and I for Q&A. Okay, let's go. So, first question you must be asking yourself is why Melbourne is the right fit for you today. Now, before we answer that, that's the goal, and we will answer that. I want you guys to see what fits for you first. So, out of the 5 items listed, what's important for you guys? Is it knowing an investment is fit for your goals? Is it something that fits your finances, your lifestyle, your tax goals, retirement? Let me know. Feel free to jot down a number or the word itself. And feel free to answer yourselves as well, Daniel and Lara.
Look, I think from my experience, when you're buying a property, it's got to be for the long term. So it has to fit your lifestyle. I mean, obviously it has to fit your finances, but you don't want it just to fit your finances and not your lifestyle. Because the minute your lifestyle, you might put up with a lower level of lifestyle for a couple of years, but then you kind of get tired and drawn down and depressed, and then you'll end up selling your property. So it needs to be for the long-term property, and lifestyle I think is really important that I think a lot of people forget about.
Prashant saying all 5 are important. Isabella, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all important. Janine saying investment goals, finance, and retirement. This low-key was a trick question because all 5 is quite important, and we've actually built our whole company around these 5 items. So the first thing you guys must realize is we need all of these 5 things answered before you even think about research, about property, about buying your first asset. Okay, even if you're thinking of buying stocks and anything, we need these 5 things understood, and that's exactly what Daniel and his team provides, along with his finance people. Right, so that's the first thing that I've got to make sure all of you understand. The second thing, the location you guys invest in actually has to make sense. So another point for you guys to comment, what actually makes sense? So from 1 to 7, tell me, is it the cheapest price, lowest supply, infrastructure, population, rental, growth history, or maybe it's just plain old hype? Let me know what you guys think as well in the comments. Let's drive up a storm. Let's get a lot of people answering this one. This is a core slide.
And it's crazy that we always thought that growth history and cheapest price are some of the contributing factors. Like for me nowadays, population growth. It's crazy.
Yeah, you've got it. You're right, Dan. You have to have population growth. If you don't have growth, you might have hype, and then the hype stops, and then property prices stop.
They're quite similar. They are linked, and that's something we'll educate everyone on. But let's see what the audience has to say. Suresh is saying rental yield and growth history. Makes sense. Isabella's saying 3, 4, 5, 6. Infrastructure growth, population, rental yield, and growth history. Shri is saying 3, 4, 5. Infrastructure growth, population, rental yield. Prashant 3, 4, 5 again. Great. So we can already start to see Oliver's saying number 4 and 5. Janane's saying 3. We can already see the audience on such a basic question, okay, start to split up into 2 groups. And the goal for me is to unify everyone that's watching today. I want everyone to leave knowing these solidified answers. Okay, so that's the goal. Because to me, investing needs to be simple. And when it comes to the fundamentals of investing, it's as simple as supply and demand. So these are the 2 things driving any investment, let alone property growth. And you'll start to see that once you understand these 2, everything else starts to make sense. You start to identify which areas are growing the most. You definitely get to start noticing which areas are too expensive. You start to see which locations are undervalued. And it's important to know which places are undervalued because that's where you find the best deals. So another question for the audience. Do you want demand to be high or low when you're investing? Simple question. Right, this is asked to me, I remember back in year 10. and I want to introduce this learning to you guys because we have to start from the fundamental before we talk anything about property. Daniel, high or low?
Man, if you asked me this question 3 months ago, you changed my mind about 100 times. To me, it's got to be high. Demand has to be high. That's what I think personally, but I'm curious to see what you're going to tell us this time around.
Yeah. Suresh is saying low. Prashant is saying high. Daniel is saying high. I think Lara, last time we ran this, you said low. So guys,
Yeah, I said low.
Fatty, nice. Low, but going to be high in a few years. Oliver saying low. So you can already see the room divider. Another example where such a basic question, guys. This is year 10 stuff. There's no clear answer. Right, so this is already confusion that's built up into your mind. It may be because you're seeing articles, reading this, reading that, but the answer is so bloody simple. It depends if you're a buyer or a seller. Most of you guys watching, I can assume you guys are buying. You're in a position where you're trying to buy your first property, your second, right? But it all depends on which perspective you are. If you're a buyer, you want to be buying at the cheapest price. And if you're a seller, you want to be selling at the highest price. Those are the goals, fundamental goals. So the question again is, and an example is Bitcoin. Do we want to be buying in the green or do we want to be buying in the red? The key is buying, right? Because for me at least, easy question to answer. We want to be buying at the lowest point. We want to be buying when it's the cheapest. And those are the best buying opportunities, right? So if we have a look at the graph, if I'm going to answer my own question, it would be in the green. So do we believe that? Is green the right spot to be buying Bitcoin? It's 225, 4,000, 30 grand. Fatty already saying red. Suresh saying green. Right? Because to me, green is where you actually get to make the money. After all these red zones, after all these selling spots, right, where people exit with money, that's when we start seeing markets decline. And that is what we have to avoid when we are buying. Great if we have that asset we're trying to sell, right? So we need to understand what triggers green markets. What makes a place, what are the articles that occur when it's a green market? So we have a look. Bitcoin will go to zero. Talks of blockchain technology, and I think it's got the price of Bitcoin could nosedive to zero. That's what that article says. No one cares about Bitcoin anymore. Again, that's when Bitcoin was at the cheapest price. What happens in the red? These are times when you really need to start thinking about selling, and these are the worst times to be buying. Bitcoin heading to 100,000 in 2018, right? Another one, Citibank report reveals Bitcoin could rocket up to 300,000 in 2021. It's nowhere even near that. But it's important to understand when the media is driving hype, when there's actually an opportunity. So if you guys have a note, pen and paper, write this guys down. Purchase in a low demand market with predictable high future demand. So, Fatty, earlier you said you want to be buying in a low demand market, but high demand market in a few years. So you hit it, nail on the head. Daniel? Lara?
Darwin, Hobart. It's crazy to say that our country is great. We have different states growing at different times. We see the media, news, family and friends, social media, news reports. Everyone's saying something different. We don't know what's currently hot right now, what's going to happen next. So, guys in the chat, if I could say one thing, what are you hearing at the moment? What are you hearing on social media, the news? What are one or two states that you feel like are the next hotspot or you need to get into tomorrow or you're going to miss out completely? Guys in the chat, I want to hear your thoughts.
I want to as well. What are you hearing in the media? What are your friends and family saying? What about socials?
What are you hearing, Lara?
Well, I mean, it's funny. Up until probably late last year, I was hearing Brisbane, Perth, and even sort of the introduction to Adelaide, saying that Adelaide is hotter than Melbourne. But since then, I think I am hearing a lot more of Melbourne. Now, maybe that's because I'm on some people's feed, or maybe other people are actually seeing the opportunity here as well, which I came to you guys with last year.
The comments come in, Luke. We got Melbourne, regional WA, regional Queensland. It's crazy.
WA, Queensland. A lot of people today saying Sydney, and I want you guys to remember that comment. Please do. Melbourne's going to be high. Regional Queensland. Yeah. Perfect. Very good. So what I got out of it, from my perspective, and what data has also shown, is Melbourne and Brisbane and Perth has been really hot recently, right? And it may be because of these articles. If we look at the top 10 investment locations when it comes to growth, this article has 6 coming out of Perth and WA, right? These are places that are growing like 40, 50%, right? Occupying these locations. So of course, when you as a beginner investor or even an experienced investors tend to listen to these headlines, that's when we really start seeing how media can change people's perspectives. But it wasn't always like this for Perth. Daniel, we started our careers basically in that 2015, 2016 range. And these are the articles that I remember. Perth property correction to continue in 2016. Prices are going to continue to fall. No signs of bottoming out for the property market. Perth's 4-year housing bust, like nothing we've seen in Sydney and Melbourne. Perth's property prices free fall, arrested. Recovery could be years away. Now, I remember this really well, and there's no one else that remembers this like you, Daniel. Yeah, and Lara as well, right? I'm sure you've seen this, but they came to a point where it started to change. So in 2020, for some reason, people started seeing Perth as an opportunity rather than such a detriment, right?
I mean, I think it's to me, and I see, and I think it's Oliver or someone mentioned about regional areas. When you look at the data, 2020 is obviously a pivotal moment for a lot of these regional areas or areas that were underpopulated to become popular again. So, areas like Perth, people went there because all of a sudden they can work from home. So it's it's to me it's quite obvious why that they had that increase, but they had a decrease for a long time.
That's true. I remember, I think even before 2015, they did have a bit of an increase as well. So it goes to show it does come in cycles.
Before GFC, yeah, absolutely. Before GFC, it was probably the second most expensive place in Australia to buy. And then when the mining boom sort of stopped, the prices start to come down and probably, realise to where they should have been.
And I find with Perth, especially that 2020, it did take a turn. Everyone started to there was a buzz around it for some reason. But for me, from a data perspective, this is the reason. Most of the articles, most of the data points reflected that Perth's sentiment is because of cheap housing prices. You can see down on this one as well, where to look for homes under 400,000 in Perth. So it was no longer doom and gloom. All of a sudden, people started to change. And fast forward 5 years, it went from 520,000 median to 700, almost $800,000. That's a 51% growth in 5 years. For a market that back when we started, Daniel, nobody wanted to touch with a 10-foot pole. And now we are seeing these articles. Perth property market so hot that agents are ditching price guides. Right? I would never advise you to put the price down. Home selling for $150,000 more than it was initially listed for. There's also articles saying there's a forever boom predicted in Perth property. Guys, if you ever see these articles, just close it. Like, it's the worst place to get your information from. You know it's somewhat clickbait, right? There is somewhat driven by data, but these article headlines are not what you should be listening to. True, that's a really good question. Let's see. Audience, do you think it's too late to be buying in Perth, right? When it's up 51% in 5 years. Now, some of you may still believe that market, see it. Sure, I'm sure there still may be, but I'm curious, is this still as great of an opportunity as it was 5 years ago? That's the question I want you guys to think about. What about Brisbane? We're noticing that Brisbane kind of went through the same thing. Okay, from 2015 to 2020, not much happened, right? The median value of Brisbane was $565,000. Brisbane house prices hit record high in 2020. Why? Because it was driven by affordability. One of the strongest markets at the time because it was affordable. So I want you guys to remember these words. Affordability for Perth, cheap houses under 400K. These were the headlines that really started to push that market onwards. Now, you could also argue that the Brisbane Olympics really had something to do with it, because that's when we started to see the Brisbane headlines talk about Olympics. Now, Daniel and I are pretty passionate about how the Olympics went to jack all for property prices there. But regardless of what we think, it did drive a lot of the media, right? And since then, come on, 565,000. Now the prices are just shy of $900,000, a 54% increase in 5 years again. Like, Dan, Lara, this is absurd. Amazing for the comments that you recommended, Daniel, back in 2020, but now it's really crazy. No, absolutely. And now it's quite disheartening for the local guys, right? Brisbane homes are now the second most expensive in Australia. It's upwards to that $1 million range. And for the locals, it's very disheartening because it is passing and getting close to that $1 million.
Makes it really hard for the locals. Sorry, it makes it really hard for the locals that live there that, you know, either need to rent, and the rents have to be higher for these investors that are investing this amount of money. And also those that want to upsize and get their family home. You know, they might be selling in the same market, but they have to pay a lot more just to get that larger home.
Isabella's saying that Brisbane will keep increasing, and we're not saying that it won't. There will come waves. It'll still continue to grow. I'm sure in 5 years' time, it's a great investment. But for me, what's important is the opportunity cost, right? We've seen it grow 54% in 5 years. Doesn't have enough legs to continue this. Or are there other markets that can benefit that kind of we can learn from what we are learning today and these old existing cycles. Right. Let's continue. So what are we learning about analyzing Perth and Brisbane, the history and the data, right? What I learned is that when demand is at its lowest, when no one's talking about Perth, when no one's talking about Brisbane, that's when the discounts are available, right? And we're seeing this repeat itself over and over again. When there's discounts available, it means the properties are actually quite affordable there. What ends up happening is it's a greater or a better opportunity to be buying, right? And when you buy an asset that's lower and the rent is continuing to increase, you start getting better rental returns. And as an investor, I want better rental returns. So I'm looking for these opportunities, right? And as more investors enter that market, there's more buyers. When there's more buyers, there's less supply. There's fewer properties available. Everyone's fighting for the same good opportunities. And then that creates that perfect storm where it starts to create capital growth, price rises, wealth creation, wealth building, right? So we are seeing this with Brisbane. We've seen it with Perth. What about Melbourne? What are people currently saying about Melbourne? All right. In the comments right now, tell me, what have you heard about Melbourne? Has it been as crazy, high, bullish as Perth and Brisbane, or potentially it's not, right? Maybe you're hearing a bit of negativity. Maybe you're hearing a bit of land tax things, how it's affected, maybe the election, whatever it is. But this is what I remember. In the past few months, we're seeing all of these. Why investors are fleeing Melbourne's property market. Why Melbourne's property market is struggling so much. Is Melbourne losing its shine? Lara, you've lived it, you've breathed it, you're our Melbourne expert. Is this true? Is this what you're seeing and what people on the floor are hearing about Melbourne?
Oh, look, I think the property market in Melbourne has definitely struggled for a little bit of time. But when I say struggle, it's just fallen a little bit flat. So there hasn't been the price rises since COVID of what we've seen in other states. And I know you've got a special graph to show us later. It's investors, I disagree with why investors are fleeing Melbourne's property market. I've worked for a lot of Melbourne developers and high net worths and local families. Very rarely do they actually invest in other states. Most of their investments are in Melbourne. So, definitely investors from other states have not been investing in Melbourne, but investors that live in Melbourne have always continued to invest in Melbourne. That hasn't changed. And in actual fact, they'll see the opportunities, similar to what you're saying, to buy in the green zone rather than wait in the red zone. So the investors in Melbourne have been buying up, whether that's residential or commercial, actually.
I'm looking forward to showing people why Melbourne is our number one pick. But before we get there, Jasmine's saying, yeah, there's no growth there. Fatty's saying there's negative vibes. I love that word, negative vibes about Melbourne since
Agreed,
COVID,
Fatty. Yep.
Sam Lee is saying stringent rental reforms, tax thresholds, inside trusts, all that stuff. Maritite is saying, well, with the high cost of living, Sydney is, okay. Maritite is onto something. I want everyone to note that because it's coming. But yes, look, there are those negative headlines out there. Now, whether or not it's true or not, with a lot of the reforms, the tax stuff, yes, there are those articles. But we need to change our perspective as investors, as data analysts, to see opportunity rather than being freaked out over these headlines. Okay? Because those articles about doom and gloom, about the markets, it's starting to change. And when it changes quick. We've seen it in Brisbane and Perth. Okay? So what's Melbourne being spoken about now? Melbourne's house values snapped 10-month decline. Why? Because of the last interest rate cut. So what happens when interest rates cut is people have more money, right? People are actually starting to be able to buy property. Potentially you were able to borrow 400 before, and now you can borrow 450. So the people that are actually enabled to purchase property when these interest rate cuts arise is the affordable market, right? It's not people that are borrowing 1.2 mil and now they can borrow 1.3. No, it's the people that were limited to 400. Now they can purchase at 450. So naturally, they're looking at affordable markets. That's psychology. And now we're seeing Melbourne starting to turn. Similar to Brisbane and Perth, those who bought during this time have seen significant capital growth. And this is really exciting. And the biggest thing I want everyone to note is, meanwhile, while Perth right now, seller's market, they're trying to increase the price, right? They're selling 150K above asking. Whilst in Melbourne, right, homes are selling at a discount. $160,000 below initial asking price. So these are the places where Daniel, where myself, where Lara can go in and actually negotiate and find good deals. Not in those hot markets, right? So like previously, those 6 items, the first thing is identifying where demand is low. The second key is identifying where the biggest discount locations are. And this is really exciting because data is showing Melbourne is currently in a buyer's market, right? And it will be a strong seller's market in the near future. And let me prove that to everyone watching today. This is my favorite slide of the whole PowerPoint. This graph comparing basically all of the states in Australia. I want you guys to tell me what you guys notice, especially about Sydney and Melbourne. And I want to linger here for a little bit longer because this is the most important slide. What do we see about Sydney and Melbourne? Let's see if the audience picks this up.
Mm.
100%. Okay, we've got a few people identifying it correct. Jasmine, congratulations. Maritides, congratulations. They have the same pattern. So until you map it out in a data perspective, until you do this exercise, you can make guesses about why properties grow. But once you lay out these graphs, once you see how similar the line of Sydney in the red and Melbourne in the yellow, and how they follow each other no matter what, right? So this is from 1995 all the way to 2022, yeah? No matter what, Sydney or Melbourne follows Sydney. Now, the key difference that not many of you identified is the huge price gap. I mean, it's clearly labeled on the screen, but the huge price gap, which is about $450,000 difference between Sydney and Melbourne. So you must be asking yourself why. Now, I've got the answer on the screen. In my personal belief, it's these 6 items. All right? These are the reasons why Sydney and Melbourne are so similar. Career opportunity, it's a high quality of life location, superior education, it's very cultural diverse, right? I can be myself and live very happily, right? The key thing is safety and stability and also healthcare. They're fundamental things that we need in order to survive as a human race and be happy.
Can I just add something, sorry, Luke, to this? I mean, I just love seeing this graph because obviously seeing how much Melbourne follows the trend of Sydney, and over time, it's not just 1 or 2 years. Like that's quite a few years, and before that, if you even had the data before. But what you're seeing there is that Melbourne didn't have the same increase in price, in values as Sydney or as Brisbane or Hobart or Adelaide, and even lesser degree Perth since 2020. And someone mentioned before, I mean, yeah, after 2020, we really just went quiet. We're in lockdown for 2 years. So it's very clear and evident that there was a reason there, and we can identify what that reason is of why it didn't have that growth.
Sam Lee should join my team. The gap between Sydney and Melbourne is the greatest. indicating Sydney being overpriced. I could argue against that, but that's fine. And Melbourne being underpriced. Nail on the damn head, Sam. That's perfect. Right? But you can argue, right? I want you guys just to notice what else is interesting. Brisbane, Hobart, Adelaide, Perth. Those are markets that are going everywhere. There's different reasons for those markets, right? For Perth, you can argue mining, right? It'll go up because of mining, low because of mining. For Hobart, maybe a lifestyle, people wanting to, escape, be out in the bush. I don't know, right? But for whatever reason, they're different. So if you believe in the Sydney market, which a couple of you guys did, if I scroll up on the comments, right, when we determine which places is hot, let's see who said what. Jasmine said Sydney will be a hotspot, always be a hotspot. And someone else, Saresh, said Sydney will always be on top. If you guys believe this, then you guys need to believe in Melbourne because it's the same fundamentals for $450,000 less. Like that is the key lesson I want you guys to learn about this. The difference between Sydney and Melbourne, right? And how it differs to all the other states. So the main question you have may be, why is there such a big price difference between Sydney and Melbourne? So I want you guys to, especially if you visited or if you live in Melbourne, what it's like walking through the CBD. How does it feel? Does it feel different to Sydney? Because a lot of you will actually say, yeah, it does feel a little bit different. There's a bit more culture, there's a bit more lifestyle, it's a bit more lively. Now, the reason Melbourne seems that way is because people actually live in the middle of the CBD, right? Majority of those big skyscrapers that you see is for people to live in. Whilst in Sydney, if you walk through the CBD and you look up to those skyscrapers, majority of the time, they're the big banks, they're big companies, Salesforce is there, you've got Channel 9, Channel 7, right? Those are the companies that occupy the middle of CBD. So what Sydney did was Sydney grew out. What Melbourne did, Melbourne grew up. So fundamentally, they started off very differently, right? So although the culture, lifestyle, everything's quite similar, Sydney grew out. It expanded further. People valued land, whatever the reason is, right? And now we are seeing the $1 million property range, right? That big circle is 60 kilometers out. So that $1 million price point, you have to go so far in order to get an opportunity that's under $1 million. In Melbourne, that little ring is 20 kilometers away. Does that make sense, guys? Daniel, is this hitting? Yeah, it's going to come through.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I've been seeing it developing in the past, particularly the past 15 years. So yes, people come here from overseas. One of our big exports in Australia is education, in particular Melbourne, because it's more affordable than Sydney education, and also the lifestyle is a lot more affordable. And if people from overseas are sending their kids here to study, they know they're safe. They're within the CBD. This is where they can live. This is where they can study. And, eventually this is where they can potentially apply for residency and stay.
And bring their families on board as well. And we're seeing a lot of that with our migrant community for sure. Just to back up both of what you guys are saying, we may what I said earlier really isn't backed by any data, right? But to support what we are saying, the data is showing, right? Yeah, the Melbourne CBD population is 4 times more dense than Sydney's CBD population, right? So it just goes to show from a data perspective, yeah, it doesn't just feel like it's more lively. People are actually living there. That's the reason why it's different. And what's unique about this is Sydney grew out, right? Sydney now is so far out that there's actually limited land. Whilst Melbourne, I would argue, in the next 2 to 3, maybe even less than that, there's still land available to grow out. And the key as an investor is to be as close as the CBD as possible before it stretches out too far. That's the opportunity you guys have with Melbourne today. That's something very unique that Brisbane, Perth, they never had these 2 things as fundamentals.
I think also, and a couple of you in the comments mentioning that Melbourne has unlimited supply of land. That's arguable, but what you've got to think about is infrastructure. The Melbourne's always about building, the Victorian government building the infrastructure, so they've got a massive project that's underway, and then build the housing around that. So whilst theoretically land can go on, you're not going to live in the middle of nowhere or have a house in the middle of nowhere. So this money's already been invested in infrastructure around Melbourne, and that's where you'll get then the popularity, the population, and you'll get the investment, and then those councils actually then restrict that land supply too. And eventually what will happen in some of those outer areas is then they'll start building up. So it's about keeping the same infrastructure and then building up, which is what we've seen in the centre of Melbourne.
And to address some of the comments, Daniel, Lara, I'm actually quite happy with our audience today because they are a lot more educated this time round compared to the last time we ran this. Sydney's landlocked, can't expand unlimited. Melbourne has unlimited supply. These are all comments that we're going to actually have a really good time in the next couple of slides. So I'm just going to power through and this will be really entertaining. Get ready to answer some questions, guys. Where would you have invested in Sydney 10 to 20 years ago? Think about that. All right, you have the opportunity to purchase a Sydney property anywhere. Where would you have gone to? Especially the people that are from Sydney, right? I'd love you guys to write a comment here, right? Because we're at it. We're nearly at the precipice where you'll realize the most today. Let's see. Jasmine's saying Wollongong. Unfortunately, Wollongong's not quite in Sydney, but I get it. Fatty's saying Western Sydney. Let's get a bit more specific. Give me some suburbs. Yep. We've got Parramatta, Western Sydney, Bondi, Penrith, Campbelltown, Sydney CBD, Krabi, the Hills. Good. Malcolm Turnbull's house. Sure. All right, maybe let's rate it in, right? Daniel, where would you have gone? The comments are funny today, bro. Where would you have gone, Dan? Yeah. Maybe I need to rephrase this question to where is a place that isn't those beachside luxury places? A place that maybe you thought was quite a dungy place to be in. Anyway, some of you guys did get it right. Fadi as well as RJ. This is what I look for. So I don't like guessing, right? I look at data. And the first thing I look at is the city plans. So this is a city plan from 2005. Now you must be wondering, oh, gee, why are you looking at something so old? But I do it with a purpose. I want you guys to realize something, okay? By looking at where the government thinks it's necessary for people to be, it is a great strategy for you guys to find that next investment hotspot. I hate that word, but I'll use it today, okay? In 2005, 1.1 million people were predicted to be in these 2 locations. That's the Northwest Growth Center and the Southwest Growth Center. All right, so this was a plan 20 years ago. What are these locations? Kellyville, Box Hill, Rouse Hill, the Ponds. And to your point, Daniel, Leppington, Austral, Prestons, Casula, these are the government-determined spots where growth will happen. So my question for you guys is, you trust what the government's doing regarding where the infrastructure is, where they're building schools, where they're investing, or are you going to trust some random article that you've read that says XYZ hotspot is the next place to be? I want you guys to actually reflect on this, because by looking at the 2005 plan, we can learn a thing or two about what is happening today. So in 2014, in that Hills region, this is a place in the Ponds, so close to Kellyville, 10 years ago was $650,000. Very obtainable at that time. And now, 10 years later, in 2024, that property is $1.15 million. $500,000 of growth here, guys. Like, this is crazy. I would have loved one of these in my portfolio. What about a little bit south? In 2004, when the initial plan first came out, this property was $370,000 in Prestons. Okay? Today, $885,000, $500,000 more than when it was purchased. Is this a good strategy? Is this true? Do properties in this location, are they desirable now? Because back then it wasn't that desirable. I remember even Daniel having trouble selling in that Leppington Austral locations. Yeah, no, seriously. And I can't wait to show the next couple of slides. But guys, the reason they grow, and we touched upon it a little bit in the past, is because of supply and demand, right? A lot of you guys did mention that Sydney's land is starting to get locked. And the data is supporting what you guys are saying, what you guys are observing. So all the pressure about Sydney being unaffordable, all that, this is the reason. Sydney City to expect to be run, wow, English. The city is expected to run out of land within a decade. And this was an article in 2019. So we're already halfway there. So in 5 years' time, no more land in Sydney. Insane. On top of that, Sydney's population is also predicted to explode. And the two locations that we mentioned in the past, right, there's two government hotspots, right, is where people will live in 20 years. So, do you believe this process, this research methodology, what I'm sharing with you guys today, reflecting on what Sydney's done, is better than guessing? Now, Daniel, Lara, I remember the first time I showed you guys this. And even as experts, as you guys, there still was a little bit of guessing. You still had to select a suburb here. Maybe it's better than that one. But is this a worthwhile strategy? And I'm very curious what the audience has to say too.
Yeah, look, I think it's so valuable. I mean, we've established that Melbourne follows a similar trend to Sydney, apart from post-COVID. Even though the trend is still up, it's not at the same degree. And yeah, we're looking at past performance and comparison. Love it.
Prashant's saying yes. Janine is saying yes. Marites, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. 100% agree. I did not know we could do emojis in this chat. Do you guys know that? Oh, we can too. There you go. Lovely. Didn't know that. First one. If you guys believe this process and this research methodology, and it actually excites you a little bit, the data is showing Melbourne is experiencing this exact same thing. So we're getting to that point. All right, so we've seen what Sydney has done, and I'm here showing you guys today that Melbourne will do the same thing. And this is how. The same city plan that Sydney came out in 2005, Melbourne's got its own version. But this version is 2020 to 2040. So this is happening right now. Right? The north and the west of Melbourne in 2040 will have 3 million people. in this location. So Sydney said the north and the south corridor, right, will have 1 million. What Melbourne is saying is these two locations have 3 million people. And as an added kicker, there will be 1 million additional residents by 2036. So that's in the next 10 years. 1 million people, right? Does this make sense to you guys now? Is what I've said in the past about locations, breaking down the states, understanding what Sydney's doing, showing you guys the line, does this make sense? Is this common sense now? Because from a data point, we can analyze if the government's lying to us or not. And the way I look at this is looking at the precinct structure plans. I can see exactly where the new precincts are in Sydney. Sorry, I can see exactly where they are in Melbourne. The ones in blue are the brand new suburbs that are approved by the government. So these are areas that Kellyville once was, before the big shopping centers, before the metro line. These are areas, or this is a strategy to identify where the government will invest in the future. So the first thing they do is, yep, this is a new suburb. Once they have that ticked off, they'll go, we'll put a school there, we'll go put a train station there. So if you believe that infrastructure is a big, important part of making an investment decision, we need to look a step before that, which is to see which place is approved in the first place. Because they're not going to build all of that in a place that's unprogrammed or in pre-commencement. It's not even determined to be a livable place, let alone have infrastructure there. Now, so data is showing all of this. But data is also showing, and the government is also admitting, so this is a source for Infrastructure Victoria, that land will also run out. So the government's determining this yellow section and this green section. What are the government naming these sections? Melbourne's new growth areas. The government's admitting these are the new growth areas. Like, I don't know if I have to kick and shout and, I've been bullish about Melbourne for the past 4 years whilst everything else is going crazy. I've looked like an idiot. I go to Dan and say, Melbourne's the next big thing. He goes, nah, Brisbane just went up 40%. Melbourne's done nothing. But this is the reason why I'm so passionate. The government's determining these are the places. And Fatty, Geelong will be a part of Greater Melbourne. Correct. You can see even this section, it's currently unlabeled on this one, but Geelong is also being part of the picture. All right, so great observation. But the key for me is land will also run out. By 2040, which just so happens to coincide with the government plan, by 2040, there will be no residential land available in Melbourne. So the same things that Sydney realized, Melbourne's going through the same thing. So these little yellow spots, right? Yes, they are determined as new growth areas, but they're a little far. So my question, is 40 minutes too far away? If you guys are from Sydney, 40 minutes is here to Kellyville, sorry, from the city to Kellyville. And for Melbourne, it's from the CBD all the way up to a suburb in Mickleham, which is in that north growth corridor. Is 40 minutes too far away? Daniel, Lara, let me know your thoughts.
No, I think in definitely within Melbourne, you can be 40 minutes in the car just to get, sometimes if you're crossing to the other side of Melbourne, just to get within 10 kilometres.
That's it. Probably agrees.
Really?
Probably the same hour. Was an hour too long for you guys in the past? Like, when did an hour become the norm? Just out of curiosity. Normal? Yeah. I might be biased because I'm from Sydney. So, like, anyone from Melbourne think 40 minutes far away? This is quite an interesting topic to stand on. It seems like people are always saying, no, hours reasonable. Like, I believe it because I'm from Sydney. I live it every day. But what's interesting from a psychology standpoint is if you're from Melbourne and you're used to the 20-minute travel, does that become too long?
Well, I
Because-
don't think there is many 20-minute travels within Melbourne, to be honest. Like, you know, unless you're living in sort of the blue ring areas, it just doesn't really exist. And the other comment I have to make is that because of all the new infrastructure that's gone on in Melbourne, that people are now Melburnians used to drive everywhere. But now with all the infrastructure that's there, we're used to catching transport. So if you're working in the city, you wouldn't be driving in the city. You would absolutely be catching transport.
Jasmine's actually got the inverse. She thinks 40 minutes in Sydney is too far, but in Melbourne it's short. That's the first time I'm hearing of that one. But it's interesting to note because I think it's becoming more and more accepted that it's not too bad, and people actually live and can still travel, get to work. Yeah. So knowing that it's acceptable, I'm glad the audience is now saying it's acceptable, right? From the CBD to Kellyville, which is the example used previously, that was around 30 kilometers out from the CBD. Okay, when prices were $650 and now it's at 1.15 million. So what opportunities today can you get 30 minutes away from Melbourne CBD? We're looking at 3-bedroom houses, right? 3 bedrooms for 300 square block of land for that $580,000, $600,000 mark. Does this surprise the audience? Does this surprise you guys? Because it's getting to a point where it doesn't surprise Daniel and I anymore. Lara, you've lived in Melbourne. It probably doesn't surprise you. But
No.
for investors that are looking at Melbourne, typically they still believe that it's quite expensive. Or maybe they're so conditioned about Sydney's market.
But you know what also, guys, I think it's affordability, right? Like in that price point is where most investors, you know, can afford to buy, or first-time buyers afford to buy. And it's a really popular price point. So if you circle back to your data, Luke, where you had with other states, and when they all of a sudden skyrocketed in price, they all were around that 580-ish thousand mark. And it didn't take too long for them to get to 750, 800. It's when you're sort of looking at a base of 800 or 750, how long does it take for that to get to $1 million? You know, so in this affordability price point, I think it's, yeah, and within 30 kilometers.
Is saying that it's exciting. Well, I'm glad I'm making it exciting, or maybe it's just the data. Remove me, it might still be exciting. I don't know, but let's keep the excitement going, yeah. Because I want to give you guys a little exercise, and this is something my mentor taught me, and something I hope you guys can take out of today, right, as the biggest learning curve. This is Kellyville in 2014, so we can talk about what ifs and all that stuff. We missed the boat, but let's see if we can practice this. 2014, this is the exact Kellyville block that we showed earlier, $650,000. What do you guys see? I see fencing. I see unfinished grass, looks like crap. Barely any cars there. In the distance, there's land that's not even ready. It's a site. It's brand new. It's not looking like much. But the people that purchased at the time, now that we have hindsight, we know that they've benefited greatly. And this is what it looks like now. $500,000, 10 years later, the trees are set, the fence is gone, the house is beautiful, the landscaping's awesome. And just so happens all of a sudden in 10 years' time, it went from a crap place to be to one of probably the most livable places and most expensive places in Sydney in a 10-year span. Now, Daniel, I wish we had opportunities to purchase this, mate. and it's a place to be. So here comes the challenge. This is Mikulim today. That $580,000 spot. This is Mikulim in 2024. What do we see and how do we compare this to Kellyville? I see fences. I see vacant land. I see grass that looks like crap. Okay. In that 10-year difference, I mean, I'm guessing I'm seeing some solar panels now, which is great for the environment and whatnot. But guys, it looks identical. It's very similar. So as an investor, pardon me, do you guys have the ability of foresight? Because that's something professional investors train. That's something that Daniel and I practice on a daily basis. Not predicting the future, but hedging our bets, seeing if we can predict the future, right? Because once you have that ability, you start to see things in a different perspective and you no longer focus on things like news articles, interest rate drops. Everything disappears when you have this ability. Do you guys see Mikulim? And I'm sorry, guys, you've blocked it off. There we go. Do you guys see the ability in 10 years' time? Where will Mikulim be, price point wise, in 10 years' time? Is it similar? Am I crazy? You can tell me to log off. What do you guys see? Daniel? Lara?
Well, I mean, I think I love that the price of 580,000 is well under Melbourne's median. So in 10 years, even if it follows Melbourne's median, it will, definitely then become more populated and then at least be closer to whatever the median is in Melbourne then. So.
I really like Fatty's, maybe Fadi. I like Fatty's comments. He's quite realistic, right? 850K, sure. I would make it a little bit higher than that. In 10 years' time, a lot can happen, and you guys don't even know the next few slides of what will happen. Right? 850K, anyone else? Maritites thinks it's pretty much the same. I'm guessing same as Kellyville, getting to that 1.15 region. And Shree's got a really good comment about having more property housing, and I'll save that comment towards later on as well. And Suresh is saying 900,000. So I'm glad you guys are answering this because it definitely is possible. And these are the reasons now that I'm going to show you why I believe it's possible and what the data is showing to be possible. Because right now you're seeing a vague comparison between Kellyville and a random spot in Victoria. But this is the real reason. And Jasmine says, why did I choose Mikulim? It's in those growth hotspots, and there's plenty of reason for it. And I'll continue to go. Did you know Melbourne is now officially Australia's biggest city? It's got the most population. Did you guys know that in 2022, 2023, Melbourne's population took over Sydney, and the government, as well as every prediction, is saying that Melbourne will continue to always be bigger than Sydney for population growth, or population in general. This is something that isn't spoken too much about in the media. I remember these articles came and went in a day, and no one really picked it up. It was also during a time when Perth was doing its thing, Brisbane was doing its thing. The growth was so much that people forgot about the fundamentals. So if you believe earlier slides that population growth is important, this is a slide for you. So who are the people that are coming into Melbourne? The highest foreign-born population in the developed world is now in Melbourne. So it's migrants coming to Melbourne to live and to study and to be, right? And the forecast is 3 million people additional people by 2046. And earlier we had a look at 3 million people being the north and the west side. So you can see that migration of people going to those locations. Why would they come here? Why would people from overseas be here? So previously I had 6 items. Those 6 items was comparing Sydney and Melbourne. right? I just said, oh, I made these up, career opportunity, high quality of life, education, diversity. But no, these are things that the government has determined necessary for migrants. It's like a marketing thing, right? Hey, guys, come to Australia, live in Melbourne, live in Sydney for these reasons. It's a destination for skilled workers, quality of life, career, weather, multicultural, lifestyle, business, healthcare, all of these things is the government approving in order to get people on. What else? Did you guys also know that Victoria is the second biggest economy? You could argue that Perth had the mining boom and 30% of Australia's GDP is coming from Perth. Sure. But WA is nowhere near the economy that Melbourne is, right? Because of those fundamentals before. Another thing, second biggest economy behind Sydney. Did you know Melbourne is the 4th most livable city in the world? So congratulations, Lara. You live in a beautiful place.
Yeah, well, we were number one for quite a few years. A few years ago, I think 3 or 4 years in a row. But that's all right. I'll accept number 4.
And Sydney, number 7. I think recently I had a visit. I do agree. I genuinely love Melbourne. Like, I'm not just saying it from a data point anymore. This culture down here where there's cafes, there's livelihood, because people live there, there's that energy that's missing recently from Sydney. So why is it ranked number 4? It ranked 100 out of 100 for education, healthcare, and infrastructure, 96% for culture and environment, 95% for stability. Right? It's one of the most multicultural cities in the world. So these are buzzwords, yes, but I want you guys to reflect on all of this. But the kicker, the reason why we are all paying attention today, and the biggest lesson is Melbourne is now the 3rd most affordable major city in Australia. It's in competition with Hobart and Darwin. Like that's the competition. Melbourne, Hobart, and Darwin. Perth, Adelaide, Canberra, Brisbane has all taken over during that COVID sprint. Right? From 2nd to 5th place, and it's actually 6th place now, why Melbourne homes are now more affordable. So if you guys remember from the previous slides, affordability, Perth, Brisbane, affordability. Now it's really Melbourne's turn, and people are starting to see this, right? Lara, you're starting to get this buzz that Melbourne is becoming that new affordable spot, which in my opinion is the reason why these markets are starting to grow. And it's not just Melbourne people, it's not just migrants taking note of all of this, all right? Sydney buyers are also looking south. Why? Lower cost, bigger rebates, growing population, right? The price gap for comparable properties is there, and there's a huge affordability advantage in Victoria. Now, I know that was an exhausting sprint, but how are we feeling about Melbourne? How much did you learn in that last 1 hour with us about this opportunity? Let's see what the comments have to say. And Daniel, feel free to introduce some comments as well. Does Melbourne have the largest population growth in terms of percentage or normal? Both. Melbourne has the most percentage coming in, and they have the most in terms of sheer volume of number.
And I think that's something that, I think we can all agree population growth is really important for capital growth. There's a limit of housing, I think everywhere in Australia anyway. There's only so much labour we have, so many materials and so much we can build. But then it really surprises me that some people may have, and some of you, it might have been Sam that spoke about regionals, or some people are comparing with, Hobart or Darwin, or, whoever compares Melbourne to those places. It's just, it's quite surprising, because all of those places, including Perth, when did the population growth happen? Post 2020. So when you're seeing the figures, it's all post 2020. So how long will that population growth be sustained? And if you go onto the ABS and have a look at what the projections are for those cities, it's not that great. It's pretty much just from natural births. So this is where, from what the government is saying and from the money that's put in infrastructure is really important, because that's going to support all the population growth that we will have.
We're getting some amazing comments today. Sam Lee is saying, is the current population baked in? Yes, that's baked in. I can keep screaming it. Melbourne is overtaken Sydney. Melbourne has more people. That's just the data. Okay. I'm glad today was very realistic and data driven. We'll continue. There's more to show. Jasmine, thank you. You guys are great. Melbourne is red as per your graph. Let's see if that's true. Good. Okay. Sounds like we can continue to go, because I want to show you guys where the opportunities are. These are the opportunities. We saw earlier that Mickleham was an example, but we also have the west side, right? So the reason why I believe, not just because the government is saying so, but also a bit of support, is these are where the affordable choices are. You can look at some of the places a little bit closer in, or maybe some of the places a little bit further out east. These are places that are a little bit more established. And because they're established, yes, they're more priced a little bit higher. Now, you can go and purchase these and benefit from the population growth, but it's important to understand where the people are going. Because if you buy this opportunity today, you have a high likelihood of success because you've got this population growth coming, right? And this population growth, especially in these locations, is much greater than what is already existing, right? So in Mickleham, we're looking at double. Melton, 160%. And this is by 2046, okay? So you guys want to be purchasing as soon as possible in these locations before the the upwards of 3 million people come. And that's the opportunity you guys have today. What else? What are the comments saying? Can't see the top of the... That's such a good point. I think if you replace the word hotspot and you adopt my philosophy, it's spots where you have foresight, spots where you can easily predict the future. Those are the hotspots. Now, I just hate using that marketing term, but that's really the definition of what a hotspot is, right? So, A, do these areas excite you now? And B, do these areas make sense to you? Is the data shown to you guys so far make sense? Is it digestible? Did we do a good job? Because I want to keep going, keep the momentum high. Someone earlier mentioned, why Mickleham? Why did you guys select Mickleham? And this is the reason, okay? It's not just selecting a random spot in those two hotspot locations, okay? I'll look a little bit further down. This is what Mickleham looks like today. And you can see, yes, just like Kellyville 10 years ago, there's a lot of empty land around, yeah? There's a lot of nothingness going on. What's currently there, there's a Coles, a Chemist Warehouse, a Liquorland, food, beauty, health. Sure, people live there, right? But there's not much. So as an investor, this should excite you, not scare you, right? Now that you've learned that, yeah? Because what I see is the future plan. It's the foresight. Because I have foresight to know that in Mickleham, there will be a CBD 5 times bigger than Melbourne CBD. Right? Melbourne Central CBD is around 130 hectares, and in Merrifield, it would be upwards to 800 hectares. 5 times bigger, and this is deemed by the government again. So this is approved, this is coming, this isn't a guesswork, right? There's going to be 2,500 residents in this location. There's going to be brand new schools, brand new jobs, 6 minutes drive to certain places, and a 165 hectare town centre. This to me, sorry, Daniel, go.
Mm-hmm.
Huge. Lara, I'm actually sorry, Daniel, cut you off there. Lara, I'm actually really curious about any other locations, especially because I'm biased to Sydney, but in Melbourne, are there any locations that kind of had this happen already and you've seen growth because of it?
Well, yeah, I think, and someone mentioned there in the chat, even location not too far from Merrifield, like Craigieburn. That years ago was sort of nominated like a little satellite city, and you sort of had a little shopping district. And then all of a sudden you've got more land estates, and they sort of filter out, and then the prices start to rise. Similar to Sunbury as well. So it's to have this opportunity to get in when all these plans are new in place. And the other thing that that we haven't sort of spoken about, but and I don't know if anyone knows the history of Melbourne, and without boring you too much, but traditionally all the houses sort of grew in the southeast. And then the southeast got too far away. It was sort of then got out to Cranbourne and 50 minutes and the arterial, and all of a sudden an hour to get to work on that sort of side. So since then, there's all this infrastructure that's in place in the north and the northwest. But I see such a great future with the northwest because you're near the airport. Our lifestyle's changed in the past 15, 20 years. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you wouldn't really go interstate that much or overseas that much. But particularly now with the new migrants that are coming here, they're going to travel, whether they're traveling back home, whether they're traveling interstate. So to be within 15, 20 minutes of the airport, I think is really, really key because there's less of a need to work in the city. And in particular with here, you've got this business park. So the residents here, honestly, they'll probably go into the city, just to see some shows and some concerts. Apart from that, they'll be living, within 15, 20 minutes will be their lifestyle of this area.
We're not here to pitch your property today, but I will quickly go through this. Right, it's not all about Mickleham today, but what's currently there, there's parks, there's open spaces, there's education that's currently there, and future there will be more schools and more unis, current retail, Coles, the basic stuff. And the reason why I'm showing you all of this is to help you realize another exercise of the future potential here. So this is the future renders that they've produced, and it will take a little bit of time for them to get everything ready, right? But in the future, there will be a community center, healthcare centers, childcare centers, emergency services. It'll be deemed as a healthy city with foot, bike, public transport. All these buzzwords, all of these imagery, what does this remind you of in Sydney? So going back to, I mean, we can make guesses all the time, but where in Sydney looks like this, feels like this, is a healthy city, there's got foot, bicycle, public transport. I'm sure a lot of you can actually reflect on one of these locations. Daniel, if you've got any, feel free to shoot them over. Norwest, yes. The Ponds, Sri saying community, Concord, yeah. So these are areas by nature that are livable, right? If I ask you where the best places to invest in, it would be Edmondson Park, Concord area, Rouse Hill, Olympic Park. There's something about those locations that's attractive. And 9 out of 10 times, it's because of amenities like this, right? So to prove your point and to confirm your points and your realization, guys, Rouse Hill Town Centre looks like this. You could argue it's almost, the waterworks, the buildings, the lighting, exactly the same. And I would argue if I was to live anywhere, it would be that Rouse Hill Shopping Centre field, right? And Wentworth Point, that's another one that's got a bit more apartments there, but still it's very welcoming, right? A lot of community living. This is what it's all about in the modern era. And the government knows this, so they're going to start doing that. How are we going for time? We're killing it. All right, so what have you learned from me today? You've learned a lot. You've gone through a whole journey. You've gone through Bitcoin to all of this. We've understood the market. We understand property. We've had a look at a couple of states, right? And why Brisbane, Perth, affordability was key there. And we reflected on how affordability in Melbourne is key as well. We looked at a few regions based on the government. We reflected on the Sydney city plans, and we looked at Melbourne city plans, identifying the north and the west side. And we also looked at Mickleham as just one of the examples of a suburb within those kind of spots. And that is what you guys have learned from me today. I'll now pass over to our beautiful resident in Melbourne, Lara.
So when it comes to buying a property, there's 3 options that are available to you. So first of all, can I ask everyone out there who has bought a property before? And was it your own property or an investment property? I'd love to know.
Daniel and I have a couple. Lara, you've got a couple?
While you're at it, can you actually let me know how you bought it? Did you do it yourself or did you have someone help you?
Let's not leave Lara hanging, guys. Come on, share the love.
Yep. Both investments. Did you have anyone help you at all? Or did you do it yourself?
Any people, first timers, learning about the market for the first time, having a mind blown moment, let me know as well if anyone hasn't purchased property.
Primary residence. And who did you go to did you get any information from your family or did you get anyone to help you? Did your own research? Great, learning market.
Bella's learning. That's my favorite type of audience. Those who are willing to learn.
And it's so great. And I have to say, everyone, congratulations for being on here and at this time and taking the time out to actually learn, different learning our strategies. Well done. It's after a long day, it's hard to absorb information sometimes. So really, thank you for staying on board with us.
Marity's purchased online like this. Sorry, Lara, just to address the audience quickly. Sam used a buyer's agent. Great. Fatty purchased a home of 45K. I'm questioning if that's a typo or not. Fantastic. Isabel is learning. Shri did her own research. Great. We've got a lot of people that are purchasing for the first time or even use property groups. Fantastic.
Right. Well done. Well done. So there's 3 options that are available to you when you're buying a property, and some of you have already bought. So as some of you have mentioned, first option is to do it yourself. So you're probably on the right path if you're wanting to do it yourself. Get information from some specialists, get information from some brokers, get information from some real estate agents and everything that's out there. It can be a bit of a minefield sometimes. And then you're also deciding where is the best place to invest or what do I buy? So you're going through all these considerations. How much do I spend? Do I buy brand new? Do I buy established? Do I buy an apartment? These are all considerations that you'll be thinking about and when you're doing it yourself. The next way to buy property is actually to have a buyer's advocate. So just someone, I used to be a buyer's advocate helping people to buy investment properties. The one best question that my favorite question people always ask, where do I buy? What should I buy? So a buyer's advocate will usually work on a fixed fee. They will do the research for you. They will generally, sometimes they'll favour a particular type of property to refer to you, and then they will source that property and take a lot of time to do that within, take up a lot of their time to do it within a budget, and you're paying a fixed fee for that. What a lot of buyers agents don't have is some sort of a little bit of depth with regards to investment advisory boards. So whilst some of them do recommend particular property or investments, really they should just be referring properties not based on investments, because most of them aren't part of these type of boards that Liberty are part of.
What's the main difference that you've seen in your career, especially in Melbourne, of kind of what buyers agents typically do and perhaps what we've built here at Liberty as well?
Oh, look, I think my most frustrating thing that I see now, and obviously because I've been in the industry so long, is seeing all this rise of TikTok buyers agents. And I like TikTok as a platform. I get a lot of information from there. But seriously, it's, they're there for clickbait. They, without any disrespect to a lot of them, they may have a finance degree and can run some numbers, but that doesn't make up for the experience that you need to go in to actually understand a little bit deeper, rather than just the numbers. So whilst we've all presented here, Melbourne and the data, there's also that next level that an inexperienced buyer's agent won't be able to give you, and that sort of knowledge of construction, knowledge of the developer, knowledge of where is the probably most securest place to be buying. And then we have the third option. So I'll let Daniel take this over. But it's definitely something I'm super excited about, to partner with Liberty to be able to offer this to everyone.
We've seen people come through and do it less than 3 weeks, but 4 weeks is really the goal to get everything along. So that means for you guys is by the 26th of April, you may have your full strategy done, a full financial analysis done. We've found the perfect property and you've completed that purchase. So it's really something I'm look forward to providing people as well. Mm. I'm curious with the audience, if people have actually gone to a broker to get their borrowing capacity, do they know based in the back of the head from other sources, or do you guys look online? I remember the first time back in 2018, 2019, when I was looking at my first investments was, I think the bank, the one on the online calculator came back at, I think, 400,000. And then that's when I bumped into Daniel and his team really unlocked that to, I think, 650, 700 range. So there's a big $100,000, $200,000 gap depending on that strategy, which is very interesting. So I'm curious if you guys are using the online one, because it's definitely not the best way to do it anymore. Mm. Damn. Yeah. More.
Mm.
True, and I think Lara might even be able to help you with this one, guys. Lara, coming from a experience of working with buyer's agents and as a buyer's agent, um,
Yeah, look, I think buyers agents, to buy one property, it is, as I was saying before, $15,000, $25,000. What I love about what we're offering here at Liberty is we're offering what you would get as a buyer's agent, but you're also really helping people do it themselves, in the sense that you're giving someone the entire experience and you're holding their hand along the whole way. So, there's no need to go to a buyer's agent and then spend the money and then wait for, then have to go to a separate mortgage broker and then have to go to your accountant to work out the tax structure. Here, everything's all under one roof. But sorry to digress, but in answer to your question, Luke, I would expect to pay at the very least, what you're paying a buyer's agent. So I would say 20,000 is what.
I think a key point we might have glossed over is the per property, right? Daniel's his strategy. Usually, they're building 2 to 3 properties. Is typically where we see clients at. That's upwards to 45 to 60,000 for the duration of that portfolio. So I think that's something that you do have to consider, especially if you're a serious investor, especially if you can and are able to be investing that much. But the fact that this is lifetime, one time, is the key for me. And I think the audience is not making any guesses.
Yeah. So
RJ is saying, maybe we can help him out. Are these established homes, newly built homes, house and land packages? Daniel? All right, we have our first one. Suresh saying 10,000. I think that's actually fair. Let's see what else people are saying. And I know people online: Isabella, Ali, Andrea, Selena, Maritize. It's all the people that were commenting earlier. Let's see if we can bring the activity back. Fatty, especially. I know you were commenting a couple of times. David, Ting, Janine. What do we think? Mariti's got a question. Can you help with 70 to 80,000 income? RJ saying 12K. We're getting there. Shall we reveal, Daniel? And keep in mind, it's really as end-to-end as it gets, all the way from buying your property, reviewing the finance, the strategy. There's really not all too much else there. But Daniel, I know you've got something special for everyone. Yeah, Mariti's.
How good is that? Yeah, sorry guys, that's just no, I'm just really surprised at your offer. I think that's fantastic. Well done. I'm excited because I think it just to have the money back guarantee, it allows everyone just to make a call, have our finance guys touch base with you. You'll get to understand the best structure for you, and then we'll hopefully be able just to put a strategy in place for you to what services you. And the big part of all of this as well, it's not about just like I was saying before, as a buyer's agent, being able to help you buy a property. This is actually to help you build your wealth and to buy your second and third property. So many people, like similar to the graph that you showed earlier, Dan, that buy one investment property and then they get stuck and then they're not quite sure what to buy and how to leverage, or they've maybe not bought in the right area and then can't leverage. So to be able to have that strategy, I think is absolutely golden, and that's all that's really on offer here. And then to have the money back guarantee, hey, give us a go. If it doesn't work for you, if you don't like what you hear, there's no obligation, money back guarantee. It's great.
Yeah, Lara, you mentioned earlier the importance of planning, not just for your first one. I think a lot of people do get stuck on their first, and the reason why they have is they didn't have the strategy in place before they purchased that first property. So part of that is Daniel's bread and butter is actually identifying the price point of which you should spend on your first one, having enough room for equity releases and things like that, right, Dan? And then also how to position it so it's better for your finances rather than just buying what you think is fit. So great point. Congratulations to Suresh. He's paid. We will have someone contact you. If you have paid, you do have an option to also book into a calendar that is open for our strategists and Daniel himself as well. So make sure as soon as you've paid to stay on that page, because there is an opportunity to book straight away to speak with someone. Now, I want to talk to Marides really quick because he's sent a few really good questions. Would you help me if I've just got 70 to 80,000 income if there is hope, I will be willing to join. You are basically our target audience because we don't know. We don't know what you can and can't do yet. No one's really gone out of their way to provide a service for you to find out. And that's where we find most people confused over, struggling, reading the media headlines. This is really for you. The money back guarantee is for the people that are unsure. Come through, get the answer, right? Will either be yes, you can, and here is the mind map to do so, or apologies, this is the next steps you need to do in order for you to be in the position to buy. Now, regardless, one pathway leads you to buying a property, and the other pathway, we will refund you straight up. We're not here to collect 500 and that's it. That's our job. We're rich. That's absolutely not what Daniel and I are trying to do, right? We're here to build multi-million-dollar portfolios for you guys, right? So this $500, this money back guarantee is just that first step because we know how difficult that first step is. It's what stops, seriously, 90% of people. So hopefully this is a gentler way for you guys to take that first step.
But I guess, so Dan, I guess we're all here for a reason, so I think everyone on here is here to, be curious enough just to see where they're heading and maybe get some information but more than get information, I think just, just speak to us one-on-one, this is exactly what we're encouraging for you to do. And then get the black and white on where you're at and where you can go and in what time frame, and we can map it out for you. You don't have to do all the groundwork and do another webinar tomorrow and then another one next week. Just with this, it's just one step now, and then the rest will fall in place. And potentially in 4 weeks, you'll be acquiring an investment property just before Easter.
The strategy tools that Dan use are really awesome because the thing we notice with a lot of buyers agents, the TikTok agents, is they'll say things like, all right, this place, if you leave it at 7% growth, make the assumption that it'll grow XYZ, and then just say, oh, you'll be a bajillionaire in 30 years' time. Not really how Daniel does it. He's more of a realistic approach when it comes to owning that property. So we really focus not on projections, not on future things we can't control, but the things that we can control, which is how much a property is going to hold me, how much tax is going to return into my account every year. These are things that Daniel and his softwares really allow him to do, which I really appreciate because it's quite different to other people out there. Yep. Not too long ago, one of our favorite clients that came through, Victor Lai, he was a chef. He's in Brisbane. He wanted to purchase near Brisbane. We had a look at the exercise, found out Brisbane's quite expensive. He was limited to kind of 1-bed options, 2-bed options at max. By showing him a cheaper alternative, Melbourne, he was actually able to purchase. And I think he's on the way to actually settling that property very soon. And he was basically chef, 75K income, was very good at saving. But Daniel crafted a really good strategy for Victor, and he was one of my most proud people to see come through.
And how good is that, Luke? Because you're able to take someone that didn't quite have the affordability to buy where they wanted to buy or they thought they should buy. And like I always say, just buy something, just whatever you can afford, just buy. Like, it's obviously the location has to make sense and all the data has to make sense, but don't wait for tomorrow. Just find these areas and buy now. So that's a great story of your client.
Yeah.
There were some questions I think that Sam Lee had earlier on that I just wanted to address if I can. I don't know, Sam, are you still out there? Are you still online?
I'm still online. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just with regards to, there were a couple of questions he had. One's regards to buying in regional areas. I think I kind of covered off on this earlier on. There's a lot of buyers agents supporting regional areas. Regional areas have had a lot of growth in the past 4 years, but I really am not confident in relying on the past 4 years' data to predict the next 4 years, only from COVID. So traditionally, regional areas will have a bit of a growth and then they just taper out for quite a long time because of population growth. So unless there's a reason that a particular regional area is having more, will have an increase in population growth, whether there's a new business district or a big company moving out there. Other than that, I would be very, very careful about it. And then even when you look at the growth of those regional areas with those companies and corporations, if they're moving out there and comparing that to your bigger capital cities and the population growth projected there, it doesn't really compare. And the other question he had, I think, was just with regards to some high net worth individuals. I mentioned before about what happened to them. I suppose he was asking what happened. Sam, you asked what happened to them and whether the ones in Melbourne had invested in Perth or not. Obviously, I can't speak for all of them, but I know the past 4 years, a lot of the high net worths and a lot of developers have just not been buying up residential. They've just sort of stopped. They haven't been selling. They haven't been buying. Interest rates are obviously have been a factor for them. They've already got a lot of land in place, so they've just been holding has been their strategy. And in the past couple of years, they've started buying in commercial. But we are looking at very high net worths.
We've still got about 25, 30 people online. I'm very curious what people have to say. If you've got any questions, Maneem, Andrea, Selena, David, Sandeep, just to name a couple of you. Very curious what's keeping you guys on board, and if you guys have any last questions. Other than that, I'm pretty well.
I wish I listened to all of this years ago. I mean, I was listening to it years ago, but my stubborn head didn't follow that path. So, everyone, I've really sort of learnt the hard way. I do own a couple of investment properties, but had I gone down this path, then I wouldn't be here today because I would be on the beach somewhere. Retired.
Marinese, great comment. Is it possible to ask hubby first? Hubby's not home. I get it. Look, I would encourage you to continue. Once I end this, I mean, we can make an exception for you just for today, but typically we end the webinar, you don't get a chance to scan, and that's kind of really it. Of course, we're not going to stop you from not speaking to your husband. That's absolutely not what we're here to do. But I would encourage you to still continue. If there's no blocker, know that the risk-free money back is there, and we'll take care of you as well. But if you need time, we understand as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Marie says, perhaps you can just go to your husband and say, "Oh, guess what I did." But it is a money back guarantee. Do now ask for forgiveness later, right?
Daniel whispered in my ear, if the husband threatens divorce, we'll give you a refund. Oh, David's got a question. Can you let me know if there will be any government plans to build train stations in Mickleham? Craigieburn is very, very close to Mickleham and currently already has that train station there. Donnybrook will also have a train station right next door. So in the center of that CBD, there may not be a straight up train station, but there will be additional lines, buses, as well as metros potentially in that location. So far, it's really the location near it because it's so central already in that Mickleham spot that they're really trying to connect the other spots together to Mickleham, if that makes sense. So it is currently in the way, and I believe Donnybrook is going through phase 2 of their plans as well. And I think Lara, from your point, potentially that's something you know as well. But there are definite plans. But just as a caveat, Mickleham is just one of the examples that we look at the certain price points that we look at. So it's not just saying, hey, anyone that comes through, we're going to push you to Mickleham. But I'm glad you were at least interested in what we have to say today. Ten people. We can't do any more. Yeah, for sure. Shani just sent me a message saying we've only got 2 spots remaining as well. So that's actually quite a lot of people that joined up today, which I'm very happy for.
That's great.
Unfortunately, they left.
Well
before we
done,
get to
everyone
start.
that's joined.
That's good.
We'll be having
Marides,
some good
another
conversations.
question. Marides, from a strategy point of view, can an owner stay or live in an investment property? That comes down to strategy. We cannot confirm nor deny, but it really does come down to your strategy and how we can build that around you and your requirements. But typically, we keep an investment. We encourage our investments to have a renter, right? That also helps us hold the property, allows us to build our portfolio a little bit easier. But they're things that, Daniel, that's bread and butter stuff for you, mate. So hopefully we get to see Marides online with you to actually talk her through all of it. Any other last burning questions whilst we've got Lara, myself, and Daniel? David, if you've got anything else, otherwise we'll kind of leave it there. Great session. Today was a
Right.
live.
I loved all the questions. Yeah, loved answering all those questions.
Last slide, Daniel. That's it. Simple as that. All right, I'm getting quite tired. It's 9:15 over here, but we've done a good job. I'm glad we got a lot of people joining up today. Hopefully, you guys learned something new. If you may potentially have a phone call from our team members to explain our process and whatnot because you guys have joined. So expect that. Not too much else to say. Lovely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for hopping on,
Bye.
guys. Yes. Bye-bye.
Mm.